You're turning all the technology is coming up. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. I need all the cheerleaders I can get. We're ready to go. Okay. Okay. At this time, I'll call to order the Ventura County Air Pollution Control Board meeting. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have before us the minutes of the June 12 meeting.
Move the approval.
Motion and second. Any objection? Minutes are approved. We move to item 3, the public and consent agenda. Comment time. Time set aside for citizen presentations regarding district matters not appearing on the regular agenda. If you have something to say, we have a card. This time I will call on Sharon Williams. You have the clock?
Carol Dean Williams, 62-year resident. There's a little private joke between me and Miss Parks. I want to address these engines. These engines on these gas engines on these air blowers and stuff. Now, which is the worst pollutant? Which is the worst pollutant? The engine or this dust and filth and stuff that it blows in the air? I believe that is just as much as a pollutant as the exhaust from that engine. Why haven't you people addressed that issue? I have taken pictures of that, and it seems like you people never get anything done. It's so crowded up there. I mean, it's just John Flynn. He don't even have a space for John Flynn. There's his name. But there ain't even room to put John Flynn in there. But when are you going to address this? I think public opinion is strong enough now that these gas engines on these leaf blowers and stuff, but have you ever addressed the air, the dirt in the air of moving it from here to over there, and in between here and there, it's just filthy. So are you going to tell me that that's not air pollution? Would you want to walk through that? Would you want to be next to that mess? Is that brownie good, Supervisor Bennett? I'm starving to death. You ought to cater this place. Make me stay here all day and won't feed me. You want to hear about my camera? You want to hear about my camera? Since I'm using it? The Ventura City Attorney, I got to share this story so you know. The Ventura City Attorney is so old school, he don't know about gigabytes. So I was filming the Ventura City Council, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Williams only has 2 minutes of film on the camera." He don't know about gigabytes, like there's 1 full hour of filming on this camera. And I got Supervisor Bennett eating on the job. And so are you going to address these gas engines on these air blowers? They should be, we've got rechargeable batteries now. Every one of those blowers should have one of these rechargeable batteries. Get rid of that gasoline, that exhaust. And the parks raised up there. And replace them with these rechargeable batteries. How come you haven't done that? I mean, you put filters on the barbecuers outside. They got filters on them. But that smoke usually goes up in the air. And I'm sure you've walked along the sidewalks when those blowers are blowing that hurricane of dust there. And the noise, well, that's noise pollution. I don't want to get off the subject. But those gasoline engines, and some of those are probably those 2 cycles that you put the oil into the gas and it just throws out the stinking fumes. I hope by the next meeting that you will have some answers for me about addressing that. And, lawnmowers, I think lawnmowers has come on your radar screen, but it's the same kind of engine except they're carrying it around their shoulder. It puts out the same fumes. And
Okay, Mr. Williams, time is up.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Okay.
Sharon,
Mr. Brennan.
this is a comment just to, Mr. Williams won't have to wait till the next meeting. We had this discussion. This isn't directed to you, Caroline. You can certainly have a seat. But we had a discussion. You weren't available last time. You left. We did have a discussion just regards that. And part of the funding is not just about changing out engines. It's about education, and it's also about now putting it into the storm drains and also going down, because that becomes a problem for us also. So part of that whole grant is an education. And during the exchange, when they were doing that, there's a workshop put on addressing just those issues, because this board was just as concerned about those issues you brought up. So, but if you'd stuck around last time, you would have had that answered for you. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak to anything not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item 4, which is board comments. Any comments from members of the board? Supervisor Long.
Mr. Chair, when perhaps now, or I didn't see any other place appropriate on the calendar to have Mr. Villegas speak to the status of the proposed California Air Resources Board amendment to the pesticide element of our 1994 ozone state implementation plan. I'd like to get an update on where that issue rests.
Mr. Vegas.
Members of the board, you received my memo on this item, and what's going on is the Department of Pesticide Regulation had a commitment in our 1994 SIP for the one. This is for item 11, excuse me. And they did not meet that commitment for reductions. And the interesting thing is, if you read my memo, is that in 1994 SIP, our base year inventory was 1991, and let's say agricultural pesticide emissions were right here. They said we're going to achieve a 20% reduction from that in Ventura County. But what happened is strawberries, peppers, very lucrative, especially strawberries, row crops. So significant portion of ag land switched over to strawberry production. And when you get into both of those type of row crops, you use more soil fumigants, most notably methyl bromide. And what happened is the total pesticide emissions climbed up over the years, much higher than in 1991. Well, there was a lawsuit, and it said basically you had to get, DPR needed to get back to that 20% below the 91 emissions, which was probably achievable, but now you're trying to do this. And even with, our understanding, even with best management practices, they're not going to be able to meet that goal. So what they're proposing to do is use excess emission reductions that were achieved from the state's motor vehicle programs, basically to substitute for a portion of that reduction they need to achieve. So they're modifying the state portion of our 1994 plan. What's happened recently is there was a letter that just came out from a Department of Pesticide Regulation. Now it sounds, instead of being short by a ton per day, they might be short by 1.3 tons per day. And then recently there's been talk about being short of 1.9 tons per day. Well, obviously the district and Air Resources Board, we're concerned that we want to make sure that the agriculture community implements best management practices, and we need to understand exactly what DPR is proposing. And I spoke with the Deputy Executive Officer of Air Resources Board just this morning. She's going into a meeting with the Executive Officer with DPR where ARB and the district are seeing this eye to eye. Certainly, as you read my memo, I'd never expect the ag community to exceed best management practices. The foundation of the district's regulatory program and your board's practice has been to implement best available control technology, not say you need to shut down. We've always said you meet this emission standard, you continue to operate. Same thing with motor vehicles. You clean your car up, we don't mandate that you drive less. With power plants, you put on selective catalytic reduction, but you operate your power plant. And I think it's good public policy to do best management practices. And we just need to make sure that DPR lives up to their commitment and that we're equitable to the agricultural community.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Villegas. Any other board members with comments?
I just have one comment for the benefit of the board members that aren't on the Board of Supervisors, but we have a little bit of a challenge in that we have Workforce Investment Board people waiting for us. So to the extent that we can be as efficient, I don't want to shortchange anything that this group has to do, but to the extent that we can be efficient, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to tell us that.
Yeah.
Was that a motion? I'd like a legal ruling, please. Okay, any other board comments? Seeing none, there's no closed session today. We move to item 6, public hearing regarding adoption of the proposed fiscal year 07-08 Air Pollution Control District budget.
Chair Sharkey, members of the board, I'm Mike Villegas, Air Pollution Control Officer. I'll keep this brief because we went over our proposed budget in detail on June 12th, and there are no changes. Real quick, our operating expenditures, excluding $300,000 for contingencies, are down by $389,000 from the current fiscal year. We're seeing reduction both on our services and supplies of nearly $50,000, a reduction in salaries and employee benefits of $391,000, and that's due to the elimination of the 4 positions that we went through last year. The increase we're seeing is on the fixed asset side, about $52,000 to replace some outdated monitoring equipment. So that was good news on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, it gets even a little better. Excluding the pass-through grants, we're seeing an increase in revenue of $596,000, receiving significant funding to implement both the Carl Moyer program and our AB 923, our school bus replacement, and agricultural assistance programs. And, of course, $235,000 in additional revenue from the permit renewal fee increase that your board approved. Budget once again includes $25,000 to supplement efforts by VCTC with their Dial-A-Rope program, and they have increased services there. They're now providing transit router information on their website. Looking at the net cost, the bottom line here, excluding contingencies and the pass-through grants, we would see a net cost of $331,000, which is significant. But you have to consider that we've only budgeted $100,000 revenue from fines and penalties, and we've been averaging over $300,000 a year. This year we're going to be well over $400,000. So in reality, we're probably looking at a net cost of $131,000. We are moving on proposal for a fee increase for sources where we have to update their point source inventory on an annual basis. I've had initial discussions with industry on this. They're going quite well. Anticipated revenue could be in the range of $110,000. And so, of course, that net cost that we're going to have to pay looks like it's going to be under $100,000. Real quickly, our fund balance target, the high end is $4 million, and right now the fund balance is at $5 million. So we'll be able to complete our work and pay the small net cost from the fund balance. On the revenue enhancement front, the new Congress has been quite receptive to supporting state and local air agencies, so I believe our federal funding is secure, and we're actually going to be pursuing an increase. And in the back of when you look at the correspondence packet, you'll see letters that were signed by the chair to our Senate's delegation. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Any questions of staff? We have a public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to address the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Now we can have Mr. Brennan?
Mr. Chair, this is our second go-around on this. We certainly, not to take things lightly here, but I think we had a great discussion last time out, and as we're fulfilling our commitment to public input, we have no public folks. We've closed the public hearing. I don't see any board questions. I know we had a lively discussion last time and updates, so I'd go ahead and move the item on the budget and adoption for the fiscal year.
I'd like to second that, Mr. Holden. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? None. Without objection, the motion carries unanimously. I believe we have a budget. Move to item 7, approval of proposed Carl Moyer Air Quality Standards Attainment Program. Requires a 6/10 votes. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chair Sharkey, members of the board. I'm Chris Franks, supervising air quality engineer. Today, we're recommending that your board approve $397,867 in Carl Moyer program funding to help pay for the replacement of 33 diesel agricultural pump engines with new diesel engines that run about 80% cleaner. These old engines have been extremely durable and have powered the pumps that irrigate row crops in the county for the last 20 years or more. But I'm told that the new replacement engines should be just as durable. Replacing these 33 engines will reduce NOx emissions by 27 tons per year, ROG emissions by 4 tons per year, and particulate matter emissions by 1 ton per year. Electrification of these pumps is not feasible because they're trailer mounted and moved frequently. We will certify that the old engines are destroyed to ensure the emission reductions are permanently eliminated. This is a picture of one of the engines to be replaced, and this one's been in service in Ventura County since 1970. And this is a picture of one of the replacement engines that the program funded last year. State law requires all agricultural pump engines that are currently over 10 years old to be replaced by 2011 or earlier. Engines currently 4 to 10 years old have until 2015 to be replaced. After these dates, the Carl Moyer program funds cannot be used to replace agricultural pumps. There's many more of these pump engines operating in the county, maybe hundreds. So we can expect to see more applications for this type of project over the next few years. We're also requesting your board approve the revised grant agreement as the standard grant agreement for awarding these and future grants. It's attachment 1 to your board letter. The grant agreement was revised with the assistance of County Council to reflect changes in the state guidelines. We will administer the grant agreements and ensure the project milestones are met before funds are expended. Your approval would include authorizing the APCO to sign the grants on your behalf and to make minor administrative changes to the grant agreements. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we have the item before us.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion of the motion. Any objection? Without objection, motion carries unanimously. We will move to item 8, approval of the 2008 Clean Air Fund Project Conservation Tillage Tool Grant Program. Continue.
The Clean Air Fund was established by a $1.5 million donation from the 3M Company. The funds are held in trust by the Ventura County Community Foundation. About 5% of the permanent endowment is available for clean air projects every year, and this year that amount is $35,000. The Clean Air Fund Advisory Committee recommends approval of a project to fund rebates for the purchase of a conservation tillage tool called the Wilcox Eliminator, which is, there's a picture on the screen. Because this farming equipment has multiple tools ganged together, it reduces the number of passes a tractor must take across a field to prepare the soil for planting row crops. It's estimated that the use of this equipment on a 750-acre farm would reduce diesel fuel consumption by about 20,000 gallons per year. This reduced fuel use translates into lower NOx emissions of 1 ton per year per farm and reduces 220 tons per year of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. The cost effectiveness of the NOx reductions is about 50 cents per pound of NOx reduced based on a proposed Clean Air Fund rebate of $7,000 for each eliminator and an assumed 7-year equipment life. The rebate would reduce the capital cost of this equipment by about 10%. And the proposal would provide $7,000 rebates to the first 5 applicants that farm at least 600 acres of row crops in the county. This program would act as a demonstration program for other farmers in the county to observe and then duplicate. The incentives would be available for an 18-month period. This proposal was unanimously recommended by the Clean Air Fund Advisory Committee on May the 17th. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on
Are
this.
there questions of staff?
Just one quick one, if I might.
Well-
It says that this initial phase will act as a demonstration project. So at what point are we able to look at if this is able to be duplicated?
Once the 5 rebates are used up, we will be in touch with the distributor to see if they're actually other farmers do actually buy more of the equipment.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, a motion and a second. I will point out recommendation 3, of course, is 6/10 vote. Any discussion on the motion? Any objection? Without objection, the item carries. So ordered. We'll move to item number 9, approval of market-based average adjustments and modifications to the Air Pollution Control District Management Confidential Clerical and other unrepresented employees resolution.
Very good. Hi, I'm Barry Zimmerman, Director of Human Resources for the county. What's before you is a market-based adjustment recommendation for the classifications for the management unrepresented employees with APCD. Here we have a recommendation. The attachment on the back is attachment 1, outlines our recommendations more thoroughly. We recommend moving the classification of the executive officer 9%, however, not move the incumbent in that class per earlier agreements that we talked about with when he was up for evaluation. And the rest would get a 3%. They're within market or slightly within that range of the market as we did the survey, except for the office systems manager that will move a little bit higher than that, up to a total of 5.77%. So that's what we have before you. I apologize for the lateness. Normally we come a little bit closer to the beginning of the year, but we've got it before you now.
Any questions of staff? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried.
All right.
We'll move to item 10, approval of letters to be submitted to California senators stating the Air Pollution Control Board support of S1499, the Marine Vessel Emissions Reduction Act of 2007.
In 2002, ocean-going marine vessels accounted for 14% of the total nitrogen oxide emissions in Ventura County. By 2020, the NOx emissions attributed to these vessels is projected to grow to 43% of our total inventory. In May of this year, the Marine Vessel Emission Reduction Act of 2007 was introduced in the U.S. Senate. The bill would require the EPA to promulgate regulations that require the use of fuel with significantly lower sulfur content than is currently being used. Currently, marine bunker fuel has a sulfur content running in the range of about 25,000 parts per million. You can put that in perspective with the diesel used on road at 15 parts per million. The bill would require a sulfur content limit in the range of 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. And this is similar to the limit that the California Air Resources Board adopted for marine auxiliary engines used within 24 miles of our coastline. The proposed bill would also require EPA to promulgate regulation that set emission standards for new and in-use main and auxiliary engines in these ocean-going vessels. There would be flexibility in setting those limits. They would be tasked with looking at the costs, the benefits, and the technical feasibility when setting the standards. Santa Barbara APCD has sent a letter of support. Air Resources Board has not yet taken a position, but the limits outlined both for the fuel and the engines are consistent with positions that the Air Resources Board has supported in the past. Therefore, staff is recommending your board authorize the chair to sign letters of support.
Any questions of staff?
I have just one.
Mr. Morgan.
Is there a phase-in or is it just automatic?
It's a phase-in.
How long, Mike?
Let me flip that. For the fuel, they would be trying to do something 1,000 parts per million by 2010. If they couldn't meet it, they would go with it 2,000 parts per million by 2010. By 2012, they would need to set emission standards. If they couldn't, they could set standards in 2016, but they would have to have some interim standards.
Okay. Any other questions? Have the item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? Item carries, so ordered. We will move to item 11, receive and file the status reports, proposed new rules 250.
In April of this year, the Air Resources Board amended the air toxic control measure for stationary diesel engines to include agricultural engines. This action is part of ARB's overall effort to reduce the emissions of toxic diesel exhaust throughout California. Other stationary diesel engines, including main power engines and even emergency engines, have been subject to this air toxic control measure for quite some time. This is just one ATCM of many on the diesel particulate front. Others include regulations for portable diesel engines, limitations on school bus and idling of commercial trucks, fleet rules for refuse collection vehicles and transit buses, and requirements on transport refrigeration units, and those are the auxiliary engines on refrigerated trucks. The ATCM would apply to stationary diesel engines, which are almost exclusively used for irrigation and well pumps. It would not apply to mobile engines such as those used to power tractors or trucks. The ATCM would require that these diesel engines be replaced with new lower emission diesels based on the engine size and emissions profile, with the older, dirtier engines being required to change out in 2010-2011 timeframe, and the others in the 2014-2015 timeframe. It would also require engine owners to register with the district and pay a registration fee. This would allow us to be able to track and locate those engines. And we've been working on a proposal to implement this new mandate, and we're working closely with the agricultural community to make sure we do it with as little impact on the agricultural community as possible. We're also working with the Santa Barbara County APCD and the San Luis County APC to develop a seamless regulation for the entire South Central Coast Air Basin. We would also have common application forms and reporting forms, and we would set our fees consistently. Of course, we're trying to keep our fees low, but we do need to recover our cost to implement the program. And lastly, we're working via our incentive programs to replace as many engines as possible before the compliance date to assist the agricultural community and to achieve early emission reductions. In item 7, we funded 33 of these engines already. That's all I have, and I anticipate bringing these rules to your board in September.
Any questions of staff? I know we've talked about this before, but how accurate an inventory do we have on the number of engines that are out there, and how would we conceivably enforce a registration program if we just don't know the engines are there?
I mean, it's going to be difficult. That's why we need the registration, is to find them. Some estimates are 150 engines, well into the hundreds. So it's going to be a challenge.
Well, we're not going to send people around on everybody's property.
No, that could be dangerous.
Yeah, I thought so.
But you will be notifying them of this
Absolutely.
requirement, and if they are found in violation, then of course they can be fined.
That's right, and we're working with the Agricultural Commissioner. Our public workshop on June 5th was fairly well attended, and I think the agricultural community felt the approach we're taking was reasonable. And we're working with the Agricultural Alliance and the Farm Bureau.
Mike, you might also want to address the fact that about the engines coming from other areas into the area that aren't registered, that are some of those we're trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, that's one of the other things we're trying to do consistently with the 2 other districts, is that once you're registered, to say in Santa Barbara, and you needed to move the engine down here, you wouldn't have to come and register with Ventura, so there'd be reciprocity.
Mike, let me ask you a question. It sounds like the people who come out and say, I have this engine and want to do the right thing and get a clean engine, they're the ones getting penalized on the permit fee. It sounds like we should go the other way, and because we want to incentivize these people to come do it. Why incentivize a guy for doing the right? I mean, why penalize for doing the right thing?
Well, I think we're going to have to register them, and one of the things we're going to have to know as they move through the community, and they do move, especially the booster pump engines.
Yeah, but I mean, so if I just decide I'm not going to tell you that I have this engine, I move it all around, I don't have to pay a fee. So the guy who's polluting is the one who doesn't pay for it. We want to. And it doesn't make sense to penalize people that you're asking them to do the right thing.
It is difficult. It's like a permit program. It
is. I mean,
and if somebody, but you have to remember, if we do catch a scuffle out there, they are going to face penalties. The other thing is you come in and work with us, you might get your replacement engine funded. You would get your replacement
well, that's what I'm saying.
engine
It sounds like there's a lot more incentive if we give them the push the other way instead of penalizing. We'll help you. We'll do this. But if you don't come and do your replacement, we're going to put a big fee on that. But don't penalize guys who are doing the right thing.
Well, I think they are getting quite an incentive to come in early. When you look at the price of the engine versus the $200 registration, the 33 folks that came in today received a huge incentive. They received brand new engines. And basically they're in compliance 3 years early. So I think we're using both the carrot and the stick approach, and certainly the carrot is much larger with Carl Moyer and the Egg Assistance Program.
There's no cost to them to get that engine?
They pay their copay is the cost to rebuild the engine. So say you have an older engine, rebuild cost will be a few thousand at the most, and we're paying the balance for a brand new engine. So you would have rebuilt it either way, and that's how the Carl Moyer program works. So they receive a low emission engine at a steep discount. I mean, virtually at no cost. And they also receive a more fuel efficient engine, which is going to cut their fuel costs. Most of them are. When you look at, like Chris said, that that engine's been in service since 1970, it's been rebuilt numerous times, and that is the process with these engines.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we have the item before us. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? None. Motion carries. We'll move to item 12, approval to cancel the scheduled July 10th and August 14th. I was going to... I didn't think anyone would object.
Just want to say something may come up where I'd have to ask for us to have a meeting for closed session, but I think we just cancel. And if
those
we have
possibilities are always
yeah,
there,
that's always
and we recognize that. So I don't believe there's any objection, and that motion carries. We have the correspondence agenda, items 13 through 15. Would anyone like to comment on any of these?
Receive and file.
Motion to receive and file. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? None. Motion carries. No further business, and without objection, we're adjourned.
Well, that was a quickie.
Hey, nice to see you.
Hello? There you are.
Should probably read these before I start. Just assume I'm not signing.